Hey everybody, Whitney Draven here, and today I'm going to create a diorama based on the 1994 movie, The Crow. So if it's been a while since you've seen the movie, or if you've never seen the movie, here's a quick overview. Two young lovers, Eric Draven and Shelley Webster, are brutally murdered the night before their Halloween wedding. On the anniversary of their death, Eric is resurrected by a supernatural crow that guides him through the land of the living to seek revenge on all of those Motley Crue thugs who took his and Shelley's life. It's a story about true love, but it is filled with a lot of violence and a lot of supernatural. The story is really in many ways the true healing process of the author James O'Barr, who tragically lost the love of his life at an early age. I have a lot in store for you today, so let's get into it. The goal of today's project is not only to make a crow diorama, but I also want to make it collapsible so that I can easily pack it away and bring it out every year for Halloween. I'm starting off with some foam board, and that is going to be the basic material that I'll be using to build this entire project. And I did buy this at the Dollar Tree. I didn't even know they had it in black, and I found it and I thought, yes, please let me have some of this. So anyway, I am going to be basically building the iconic window and apartment that Eric and Shelley live in. And I'm going to start off by creating the round circle window. Did you know that the leather pants Brandon Lee wears in the movie cost over $1,000 a pair? Which is a lot today, but it was definitely a lot in 1994. And for the movie, they needed at least 25 pair for Brandon to wear. Because the budget was so small, they couldn't afford 25 pair, and so they compromised, only buying a few pair, and Brandon would only wear those when the pants could really be seen. All of the other shots, when Brandon's in the dark, he's wearing vinyl pants. Now, since all the main pieces of the diorama are going to be made out of foam board, my design is going to be basically the iconic window in the center. It's going to be flanked by two sides and then a staircase. And then in front of that, what I'd like to have is a floor and then two additional walls, because I would like to have a fireplace on one side and then a vanity on the other side. But those I want to be removable, and that way, again, like I said, I can break them down and then basically pack this entire model away and bring it out every year. Now for the flooring, I actually have this extra piece of flooring. This came out of the dollhouse that I refurbished, and it was still a pretty good piece of wood flooring. It was just in the wrong color the client didn't want, so I held on to it. We're going to repurpose that today and make flooring for this little diorama here. Now for the walls themselves, when we really look at the walls inside Eric's apartment, it's really hard to say the exact color that they are, because they do a lot of flashbacks to when Eric and Shelley are in love and alive, and they do a lot of lighting that gives a very red effect. But I really don't want to paint this entire room box or diorama red, so I'm going to make up a couple colors here, and I'm going to use a very popular 90s aesthetic. Since this movie was made in 94, I'm gonna do a little sponge painting, my friends. Yes, if you were around in the 90s, then you remember sponge painting your walls was quite the rage for quite a few years. So what I'm gonna do is a combination of a maroon color, a little bit of a darker red, and then some grays. And I'm just gonna sponge paint my heart out, you guys, and allow for a lot of that black to shine through. And I'm also doing this because I am trying to reduce the amount of curving on the foam board. I'm going to frame it out a little bit too, and that's going to help, but this will definitely help to not use so much paint. Now, Eric and Shelley live in this very amazing rooftop studio apartment with this amazing view of the city, with this very iconic, huge, picturesque round window. Everybody loves a round window. There's a lot of scenes where the window itself is a character in some ways. We see Eric go through it initially when he passes away. Later on, during his journey in realizing that he is alive again, he hangs off of it and he cuts his hands and they heal. And then again, we see him being reintroduced to one of the characters, Sarah, and we see him in the silhouette. And then in the trailer and in another scene, we also see him from the outside looking out of the window right before he goes out seeking revenge on everyone who took his life and Shelley's life. So we see this window a lot in the movie. And so I wanted to create that backdrop that we see looking out, which is, of course, this very dark city, very gray undertone, a lot of gray, a lot of black, darkness. And actually it's very rainy there as well. And so I wanted to make sure to paint that out so we would have that in the background. I'm using one of my plates to get a perfectly round window. And then I'm coloring it in with a black Sharpie, and I'll paint it also, but this is just going to help me make sure that I'm cutting it out perfectly, or as perfect as I can. And I'm using just a thick chipboard to do this on. And then once I have it all cut out, I'm going to do a nice black paint coat on it as well to get rid of any of that marker look. Make sure that it fits. We've got the city behind the wall now. It's not glued in quite yet because I do want to add some lighting. And then what I'm adding are these transfer sheet to the back. This is basically the same material that I always use for windows. It's a very thin, easily cuttable film, basically. I'm going to glue that to the back and then cut out the pieces to kind of mimic what we see in the movie so that it looks like a big broken circle window. And there we go. Now all those pieces are cut and I can go ahead and glue it in place. Of course, we can see all the white from the foam board, so I want to cover all of that up. I did buy some wood trim, and I'm going to go ahead and paint all that wood trim black. This is not only going to help cover the white, but of course it's going to add some stability to that foam board to keep it from bowing or warping, which we know foam board does have a tendency to do. Now, another way to keep that from happening in a lot of cases is to just double up on the foam board, which I could have totally done and didn't. I just used a single pieces of foam board here. But for you, if you decide to do anything like this, not this particular project, but just anything where you're doing foam board, doubling up is always a good idea. All right, and then I did go ahead and add the black trim to my side panels as well. So you can see everything's coming together. We've got the sponge painting going on. We've got our trim. And now I also do want to trim the front of those floorboards as well. And then once the trim is in and glued and dried, I am taking a dark mahogany and I'm going to stain those floors because they are a little too light for what I want to do here. I definitely want a darker filling for the entire space. So here's the fireplace that I'm going to use. This is kind of similar to the one that we see Eric sitting at when he's in his apartment. He's kind of burning old photos of him and Shelly. It was similar in style, but it did have a big mirror above it. So I thought that this would be a good option for me. I do want to have a real working fireplace inside because I would like to add some lighting to the scene, of course. And I bought this one from Mini Crush, who is on eBay as well. Reasonably priced, and it is battery operated. So I thought I would pop that inside there. Now for the back of the fireplace, I'm going to add a couple magnets and super glue those on. And then I'm going to line that up with the wall panel, the removable wall panel, and I'm going to add magnets to that as well. And then that way the fireplace will hold up the wall while it's in use. And then I could simply pull that fireplace away when I break down the diorama so that it can easily be packed later. There we go. And so now that fireplace holds up that wall, and then I'll do the same thing for the other side as well once I have the vanity. Now for the window area, I do want to have some lighting behind it. So I'm just grabbing some fairy lights that is really great to use with these little small dioramas. And I'm going to go ahead and glue that in with my glue gun just around the entire back side there. And then I will cut a notch into the foam board to allow for the switch to hang out so I can easily turn it on and off. Now there are obvious paranormal elements in this movie, but did you know there were some paranormal events that happened prior to the movie? It is said that camera operator Ken Aldridge was having dinner in 1993 at a restaurant that also had a fortune teller. He decided to have his fortune read. During his reading, the fortune teller pulled out his future card, and it was the Raven, and underneath it said magic. Little did he know, in just 3 months, he'd be working on the set of The Crow with a raven named, you guessed it, Magic. And then here's what it looks like with the lights on. All right, let's talk furniture. I know they talk about this movie being cursed, but let me tell you about what happened to me during the making of this diorama. It had to do with the vanity. So I bought one and it arrived from overseas and it took forever to get here. And when it got here, they sent me the wrong one and it was way too big. I didn't have time to reorder another one. And so I decided to find one online that I could 3D print. And I 3D printed the body and the first one came out horrible. Something went wrong with the print, so I had to reprint it. The second one also came out kind of bad, but not as bad as the first one. So I proceeded forward. I was able to print the drawers. They also came out a little wonky, but usable. The legs, however, I could never get them to print correctly. And in fact, something went wrong during the print and my reservoir started to leak, and it leaked all over the interior of my 3D printer, and somehow also started to 3D print on the main plate, which is not good. And now I can't get that 3D print off of the plate. And I don't even know what to do. I feel like it's possible that my printer is completely, I'm gonna have to replace some parts to it. Anyway, total bummer. So now I'm running out of time just in general. The dollhouse shop is not open. So I was gonna go buy some legs, but I couldn't because they're not open. Don't have time to order anything online. And so I'm just gonna have to go to my stash and see what I can come up with. So I have these half scale porch posts is what they are, but I'm gonna cut these down, and these are gonna at least be 4 of the legs for the vanity. And then I have some left over of these tiny twinnings pieces, and I'm going to cut those down also, and they're going to be the back legs, and they're just going to have to do. And so I just plotted out the height, just did it just over about 3 inches to get it to a 12 scale, and I'm just going to go ahead and permanently glue those on, of course, and then paint that, and it's just going to have to work. I'll paint the whole thing in this light gray. Light gray feels a little bit more cohesive once everything's painted. Then I'm gonna go ahead and dry brush on a darker gray to give some dimension. And for the drawer pulls, also I could not print those. That was a total disaster as well. So luckily I do have some drawer pulls. I'll go ahead and glue those on. They're a little too bright for the piece, so I'm going to just paint them with a little bit of this brushed aluminum to kind of make them a little bit more subtle. And then I'm going to age the piece by adding a little bit of melted chocolate. I'm just dry brushing the base and just a little bit on the edges, not getting too crazy with it. Okay, had the same problem. The print, of course, was a disaster through and through. So when I printed the mirror frames, also they didn't print right, but I can't print anymore right now because of the other issue. So I did buy, though, some mirror paper. This is some really good mirror paper, super easy to use, really easy to cut. I cut it with scissors. Here's the shape that the mirror is going to be. So I'm going to super glue my mirror frame to that, and then I'll show you the frame in a little bit. And I went ahead and 3D printed this chair. Of course, this chair was printed before all the major issues with my printer and the other print. Now, if this chair looks familiar, it's because it's the exact same chair that I used for the Alice in Wonderland backyard. So I printed 1 more of those, and I thought that would really work nicely. Of course, we're going to paint it in some different colors. It does look like in the movie there's an area where they have like a dark burgundy or red Victorian looking sofa and chair. So I want to go with those kind of colors, but this is also an apartment that has been abandoned at this point. It's been exactly a year since everything is just sat. And of course, with that big, huge window being broken, everything inside has been subjected to the elements. It does rain here a lot in this fake city. And so I'm imagining there's some wind and so trash. And so the furniture pieces are faded and probably a little dusty and a little dirty and probably covered in some mold at this point. But we're going to go ahead and paint it in this burgundy color, burgundy and brown. And then I painted the books also, and we're going to add another element to this too to kind of make it look a little bit older. And then also in the movie, Eric and Shelley had a cat named Gabriel, and Gabriel is still running around in there, and I'm assuming that maybe some of the other tenants are taking care of Gabriel. We do see Gabriel a year later in the apartment hanging out, so I thought that it would be fun to have a little cat in here. The only cat I have right here, I have this black cat. I actually have a few of these in my eBay store too. Gabriel is actually a white cat and a long-haired white cat. So I'm just going to paint this one, and this will be my Gabriel for now. And then if I come across a better looking white cat at some point, I'll pick it up. But until then, I'm just painting this one and adding a little bit different color eyes. I'm doing a blue eye instead of the yellow eyes that this cat had, because Gabriel is kind of juxtaposed to the surroundings. So I just feel like blue eyes would be better for a angelic type of a feline. Okay, now that we have all our lighting and our furniture pieces, now I really do want to talk accessories. We already have the cat, and I want to make a whole bunch of candles. I want to make candles for the top of the fireplace, and then I also want to make some single candles to go on the vanity, as well as like a little makeup pot with white makeup in it to also sit on the vanity. Of course, we know that Eric uses that to make his face all white to paint himself up. So I'm just using some polymer clay, very simply adding some cream, some white, and a little bit of translucent polymer clay, and I'll be molding those into what look like melted candles. I want to do a couple trios, do that sit on top of the fireplace, and then those little single ones also. And then of course I'm going to make that little pot of white makeup, and I'll make a little lid for it as well. Set those aside to go ahead and cool down. And then while those cool, it's time to me to kind of grunge up and age the entire diorama. I love using my Fuller's Earth to create very dusty furniture, and the way I do that is I use my ultimate white glue, and I kind of smear it onto the location that I want the dust to sit permanently. Then I really actually enjoy using this because it feels really good. You can actually make a mask out of this for your skin. It's so soft. So anyway, I just dip my fingers in, I kind of rub it on the piece, and then I use a paintbrush to really even out the dust and make sure it's in the crevices and stuff like that, wherever I want it to really be. And then once my fireplace is nice and dusty, I'm going to go ahead and take that same brush and dust those hardwood floors and start really adding a lot of dust, especially to all the nooks and crannies and everything where dust would really pile up. I'm also going to do that on my chair, and I'll round all the books on the base of that. And I'm also going to do the same thing to the vanity, of course. And then just FYI, I did the same thing to the vanity that I did for the fireplace, where I added 2 magnets to the back, 2 magnets to the wall, so that way the vanity now will hold up that wall. All right, now I'm going to keep foraging through, and I'm going to start aging out the staircase and the window area. I'm adding some of my ultimate glue. I'll add more Fuller's Earth and really age out this area. It is also believed that Brandon Lee's death was related to a family curse. Although unsubstantiated, there are some weird links in the Lee family history. Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee's father, did have an older brother who did pass at an early age. His family felt that there was a demon who was targeting the males in their family, and so they actually changed Bruce's name to a girl's name. Then he later died of a mysterious illness at the age of 32, and then Brandon later passed away at 28 due to an unusual mishap with a prop gun. And then what I'm going to do is take some of my dried vines and leaves. Now this is a package that I got at Hobby Lobby, but Woodland Scenics also, I believe, makes a similar product that you can buy online. And I'm going to start sprinkling that around the stairs and really get a lot in the corners of the staircase. And then what I'm going to do is also glue some to the flooring around the fireplace, around the base of the vanity, and then I'll glue some directly onto the chair and the books. All right, and then the next thing I did was I printed up a whole bunch of pictures from the movie. So I've got Eric and Shelley in their candid photographs. We still don't know who took those photos, by the way. I printed up a picture of the mask that hangs on the vanity. I printed up a picture of the cover of their band, which is Hangman's Joke, which is the band that Eric is in. I also printed up some posters, headshots, things like that, all from the movie, other photo stills. I'm going to add those into the room. I also have this larger mirror. This one I'm going to hang above the fireplace. I'm just adding a little bit more dust to it. And then I'm going to glue that straight to that back wall. That way when I pack this up, I won't have any loose accessories, and I'll be gluing down all the accessories today too. So I've got my mirror up. I'm going to add my candles to the fireplace. I'll add my mirror finally above the vanity also. And then I'm going to add all of my little candles, my makeup, and then I'll sprinkle a little bit of trash and other pictures around. And I'm also including some pictures inside the fireplace. We also see Eric burn some of those pictures at one point in the movie, so I'll include that also. It's also been written that before the filming of the scene where he lost his life, the last conversation he had was with his co-star, Sophia Sheenas, in which she actually expressed some concern about Brandon not wearing a protective vest, to which Brandon said, "I'm not worried. If it's my time, it's my time." All right, now we're getting close to being finished, but before I am completely done, I do want to add a little bit of red paint to the top part of the window, just on those pieces of glass. We do see Eric swing out of the window and then swing back. His hands are cut in the heel, and so I want to just indicate that in this diorama, so I'm just adding that. And I'm going to do bright red so that we see it and we kind of know why it's there. All right, and then finally, last but not least, I want to introduce you to my doll that I'm going to be using. Now, again, I always preface and say that I know that this is actually an action figure and not a doll, but I can't help myself. Anyway, I love this doll. I love this Eric doll. It's a great looking doll. He's wearing Shelley's wedding ring around his neck. He's completely posable. Probably one of my favorite elements though are the boots that he's wearing. They are not just plastic, they actually feel like leather material. They did a great job with him, and of course you can put him in all sorts of different positioning. He also comes with this giant piece of what's supposed to be a wrought iron steeple. It's the very top of the church, the metal part that top, or I guess that is I don't even know what that part is called on the steeple. But anyway, he breaks it off and he uses it to kill the head honcho, the big mob boss named Top Dollar, because he's basically, of course, responsible for him and Shelley dying. So the doll came with that, and then also came with this giant, beautiful crow, which I'm going to glue to the back of my chair. Now, I am pretty pleased with this overall project. There's definitely some things that I can add, but let's not just worry about what my opinion is. Let's check in with Tiny Whitney and see what she thinks of the project. We haven't heard from her in a while, and I also want to introduce to you her parents. Did you know that Tiny Whitney had parents? Well, she does. They actually also live in Texas. They're very close to my own parents. They're neighbors, in fact. And so they've been out here visiting Tiny Whitney for most of October, just enjoying spending time and doing lots of fun Halloween events. But she's not the only opinion I want to know. I'd love to hear what you guys think, of course, of the Crow project. Here it is in all its glory. Now, for me, of course, as you may know, I always leave a little bit of loose ends in a lot of my projects because I love to return to them. I don't want to just do them and then set them aside and then never go back to them. For some reason, I have to leave a little bit of a few loose ends. And so in this case, I really have a few things that I want to add. For example, I want to add a stool to the vanity. I also would love to add a real mask and not a paper mask to the vanity, and maybe some black lipstick also up there. I'll also be on the hunt for a white cat to replace Gabriel probably at some point. Until then, I really do like the Gabriel cat that I have. But anyway, that's just a few things for me. But overall, I'm happy with the project. I love the shadowing too that was captured during some of the photography of the piece. I hope I did the movie justice. You know, it was such a good movie. Like I said, very dark, violent, sad, but a great story. Now, if you're wondering where I got all the behind the scenes information, I did get it from this amazing book right here. I highly suggest it if you are a fan of the movie. It goes into a ton of detail about how the movie was made, all the ins and outs and obstacles, challenges, and then it goes into quite a bit of detail about Brandon's passing and the mishap and everything that went into that. Now, if you're interested in reading the original story of The Crow by James O'Barr, it is a graphic novel, so there are some pretty gory scenes, just to warn you ahead of time, because he does go into a lot more detail on the relationship between Eric and Shelley, and then he does go into a lot more gruesome detail of their murder. If you're triggered easily, it is pretty violent. But again, if you are a fan of the movie, both of these are highly recommended. There have been many sequels made to The Crow, and I just have never really been super thrilled with any of them. This one was the best one, and I just don't know if they could duplicate this in any way. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I appreciate your time as always. If you haven't subscribed, definitely do that so you don't miss out on any future content. I have a lot of things coming up, especially in the new year. If you want more miniatures and other crafts and sometimes baking and things like that, please consider becoming a member of my Patreon. I have free and then a couple different tiers depending on what you're looking for. Okay, and here's one last weird thing. While I was filming the intro, I did catch what I think might be orbs. And so here they are in the original shot. And then I took away the green screen so you could see what they look like with that filter. And then finally just in black and white and slowed down. There are two of them, so definitely look closely. The first one kind of trickles down from the top and it's very small. And then the second one is a much larger orb, maybe like the size of a softball, that kind of floats right through the front of the screen. So let me know what your thoughts are on that as well. I hope that everybody has an amazing Halloween, have a lot of fun, get a lot of candy, be safe, have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next time.